Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please subscribe and keep watching for more detailed videos. It's not often that someone on a reality show gets a real moment of redemption, especially on a show like 90 Day, The Last Resort, where every couple is carrying some heavy emotional baggage. But Ariela Weinberg surprised everyone, not just the audience, but also the other cast members, when she decided to open up in a way that was raw, emotional, and surprisingly relatable. Her confession about why she was holding on to Biniyam's passwords had a lot of people doing a double take. What seemed like a possessive or even controlling move at first turned into something that revealed a deeper wound, a vulnerability that few people had taken the time to really understand. And in a setting like The Last Resort, where trust issues, emotional scars, and communication breakdowns are practically the main cast members, Ariela's willingness to speak honestly set her apart. Let's rewind just a bit to the moment where this all started to come into focus. The group was in one of those intense therapy-style discussions, the kind where everybody's emotions are already bubbling at the surface. There had been some tension building, not just between Ariela and Biniyam, but also from the other couples who were watching their dynamic unfold and making judgments from the sidelines. Ariela had been painted into a corner by a narrative that made her seem suspicious or overly controlling. There had been plenty of side-eyes and muttered commentary about trust, boundaries, and respect. Some cast members even hinted that Ari was still holding on to something from the past that she hadn't worked through. And then came the reveal, the moment she spoke up and laid her reasoning out on the table for everyone to hear. The room got quiet. For once, the chatter stopped, and people actually listened. She said she kept Biniyam's passwords not because she wanted to invade his privacy or because she didn't trust him. It wasn't about controlling his every move or tracking his conversations. It was about something much more raw: fear. Fear of being lied to. Fear of being betrayed again. Fear of not knowing what was happening behind her back until it was too late. And just like that, the story changed. The energy in the room shifted. Even the cast members who had been the most vocal about Ari's actions began to soften. You could see it on their faces. Maybe some of them had felt the same fear at some point in their own relationships. Maybe they were starting to realize that what looked like control was actually an attempt to protect herself from emotional pain. Ariela wasn't asking for sympathy. She wasn't trying to justify bad behavior. She was simply saying, "This is why I did it. This is where I'm coming from. This is how I felt." It was human. It was honest. And it made people reevaluate everything they thought they knew about her. What's interesting is how the group dynamic changed after that. Before the reveal, there had been tension whenever Ari and Beanie were in the room. You could tell the others didn't really know how to navigate their energy. But after she opened up, it was like a barrier came down. The cast, who aren't exactly known for letting things go, started treating her with a little more kindness. A few even apologized in their own way. It wasn't some big dramatic apology scene with tears and hugs, but it was there, in their body language, in their tone, in the way they spoke to her. One cast member in particular admitted they had jumped to conclusions. They said they had been watching Ari's behavior from the outside without considering what might be happening on the inside. That's a big deal in a group where judgment is usually the first response. For Ariela, this wasn't just a moment of vulnerability. It was a turning point. She stopped being the person people whispered about and started being the person people understood. That's not something you see often on reality TV, where drama usually overshadows depth. But this time, the depth cut through. And let's talk about Biniyam for a second. His reaction to Ari's confession was surprisingly mature. He didn't blow up. He didn't get defensive. He listened. Really listened. You could see that something clicked for him at that moment. Maybe he hadn't realized how much emotional weight she was carrying from past experiences. Maybe he hadn't understood the full scope of her anxiety. But at that moment, he seemed to get it. And Ari wasn't just exposing herself for the sake of drama. She was using the space to say, "Hey, I'm still healing. And this is what healing looks like for me." That kind of honesty doesn't always get rewarded on TV, but this time it did. The audience responded. Social media lit up with people saying they finally criticized her in the past were now admitting that maybe they had been too harsh. It's important to understand what this moment really meant. It wasn't just about passwords. It was about trust, fear, insecurity, and the lingering effects of past betrayal. Ariela's confession pulled back the curtain on something a lot of people deal with in silence. It made people realize that sometimes actions that look toxic on the surface are actually cries for help. This moment also showed just how powerful communication can be. One honest conversation changed the way an entire group viewed her. And not just them, millions of viewers too. There's something to be said about the courage it takes to speak your truth in a setting like that. The cameras are rolling. The audience is watching. Every word you say can and will be judged. But Ariela didn't let that stop her. She could have kept quiet. She could have brushed it off. Instead, she leaned into the discomfort and told her truth anyway. And that truth, messy and complicated as it was, ended up being her redemption. Now was everything perfect afterward? Of course not. Relationships like hers and Biniyam don't change overnight. There were still bumps, still disagreements, still tough conversations to have. But the tone had shifted. The walls weren't as high. The dialogue wasn't as guarded. That one moment of openness created a crack in the armor that allowed real connection to grow. Even Biniyam, who sometimes struggled to express his own emotions, started to show more vulnerability. It was like her courage gave him permission to show a little more of himself, too. That's how healing begins. Not all at once, but little by little. And the rest of the cast, well, they started to engage differently, too. There was more listening, less judging. More questions, fewer assumptions. That's a huge shift in a group that had been pretty quick to label and criticize each other from day one. So what does this all mean for Ariela's place in the show's narrative? It means she broke the mold. She flipped the script. She took control of how people saw her, not by manipulating the story, but by being real in a way that's rare on television. It's easy to dismiss someone based on the surface-level drama, but when someone takes the time to explain what's really going on beneath that surface, it changes everything. Ariela reminded people that there's always more to the story, always more behind the scenes than what we first assume. In the context of 90 Day, the last resort, where the couples are literally there to work through the most difficult parts of their relationships, that kind of honesty isn't just valuable, it's essential. It's what the show is supposed to be about. Real growth, real connection, real conversations. And yes, the show still delivers its fair share of chaos, explosive fights, and wild moments. But it's these quieter, more emotional revelations that give the show its heart. And Ariela's confession was a perfect example of that. She reminded people that healing doesn't look the same for everyone. That sometimes you have to hold on to something like a password because it's the only way you feel safe. And that's okay, as long as you're willing to talk about it, to work through it, and to move forward. That moment wasn't just about her and Biniyam. It was about anyone who's ever held on to something out of fear. Anyone who's ever made a decision that didn't look pretty from the outside, but made perfect sense from the inside. Ariela gave a voice to those people, and in doing so, she changed the way people see her, and maybe even how they see themselves. That's the power of storytelling. That's the power of honesty. And that's the kind of moment that sticks with you long after the credits roll. Come back to our channel for all your updates. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.